We're gonna dive deep into the topic of strength training for the discus throw, and we're gonna start right now. What's up, everybody? It's Dane Miller from throwsuniversity.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in learning about being a more explosive thrower, you want to have better technique and you want to have longer throws, make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So did you ever go to throws practice and have to run a mile? Maybe you get to practice and you're sitting there and your coach has you warm up, you jog 2 laps, you do this really long warm up, and then you have to run another 2 to 4 laps around the track after practice is over. And you're sitting there wondering, why do we have to do this? What does this have to do with throwing? And this is a very valid question because you can take a step back and you can start to analyze what exactly goes into the discus throw. So we're throwing a 1.6 kilo implement or a 1 kilo implement if we're women, and if we're post-collegiate or collegiate, we will be throwing a 2 kilo implement. So it's not that heavy of an implement, and now we can take a further step and say, all right, well, where is this happening? It's happening in about an 8-foot circle, and it's going to occur in a very short time frame, about 2 to 3 seconds. And say, all right, what does strength training entail, or what does sports performance training entail when we're talking about the discus throw? And right away, one of those key factors that we have to dive into when we're discussing this complicated topic is what energy systems are being used. We know that there's 3 main energy systems. There's an anaerobic alactic, there's anaerobic glycolysis, and there's aerobic oxidative. And so right off the bat, we can start to think about anaerobic alactic. This energy system is going to be utilized for about anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds at a given time. And a lot of these things we've got to remember is that they all will sort of overlap to a point. Okay, anaerobic glycolysis will occur anywhere from 15 seconds to 2 minutes. So again, they will sort of overlap, and then we can talk about aerobic oxidative. This will be anything where around 45 seconds, this is really going to start to support the anaerobic glycolysis system. And so from an energy perspective, when we're talking about energy systems for the discus throw, we know that this is mainly what we'll be using when we're executing a throw in competition. We also know that the alactic system is likely what we should be training the most, but we also know that the glycolytic system is what's going to help boost the anaerobic alactic system. So we have to think about all these systems sort of work hand in hand, but these two are the main systems that we need to focus on. We know that for the most part, we will not be using the aerobic oxidative system when we are doing the discus throw. Now, that doesn't mean that taking those half-mile jogs are completely worthless, but for the most part, they are, because this is the system that we're going to be working with for the most part, along with that glycolysis system. And so when we set up training, now we can start to take that next step and we can start to say, hey, strength training for discus, what should that entail? Now we have to look at the actual movement of the discus throw. So when we start to look at the elements that we need in regards to the actual discus throw, we can start to think about it from that top-down view. We know that in the sport of the discus throw that you have to have very good technique. You have to be able to execute the movement as rapidly as possible. You need to be able to accelerate that implement as quickly as you can in the confines that you are provided. So you're given that 8-foot circle, you have to accelerate as rapidly as you can so that you can throw as long as you possibly can. So you have to have technique. So in your strength training for the discus throw, we know that you need to have some semblance of technical coordination. We need to have complex movements that will transfer really well to the discus throw. Something that can fall under the lines of the technical coordination would be an Olympic lift. Let's just say you have something, you have a nice starting strength right off the floor, so starting contraction right off the floor. Then you have to have force absorption when you're catching a clean. Then you have to have a reactive component. So you have to react quickly and recruit as fast as possible and accelerate up through the finish of the entire movement. So we know that when we're throwing, that technical coordination is needed by the athlete to throw further. And when we're in the weight room, we can also train that key element of technical coordination by using different variations of the Olympic movements. We also know that absolute strength can transfer to help improve technical coordination. We know that absolute strength also can help us be a little bit more dynamic. It can help us improve how we absorb force in different positions. So if you think about in the discus throw, when the right leg of a right-handed thrower will ground in the middle, if the thrower is stronger, they can absorb that force more effectively. And as they get to the finish, they can then reuse that energy more effectively because they have higher levels of absolute strength. So we've got to think about with absolute strength, dynamic strength falls under that umbrella, maximal strength falls under that umbrella. And then we can lead into that next big one. We know that discus throwers, especially women, need to be very, very mobile in their thoracic spine. They need to be very mobile in their trunk, very mobile in their hips. They have to be mobile. Men and women have to be very, very mobile when they're throwing the discus so that they can hit a deep position and then they can have a longer path to accelerate that implement through the finish. And again, that can lead us back into some technical coordination movements. We can use movements like the snatch, and we can pause in the hold to try and open up that thoracic spine. We can also do mobility exercises during our training or after our training to constantly help us increase that passive flexibility while also improving our stability in each of those joints that we need to improve. And then finally, we have to have some ability of special strength. So special strength can be defined as basically mimicking the actual throwing movement and then taking the movements that are typically associated with the weight room, say a power clean, a snatch, a push press, all of these technically coordinated movements, and now the bridge to get them into the circle is that special strength movement. So maybe we're doing some side banded standing throws. Maybe we're doing some side med ball throws. Some simple special strength movements that now our body can start to learn how to coordinate and learn how to recruit the muscle fibers and the motor units that we've triggered through absolute strength training and through technical coordination. So all of these elements are absolutely key to improving our discus throw. On top of that, all of these elements can be trained inside of these two energy systems. So when we take that step back even further as athletes and as coaches, now we can take this as a blueprint and we can say, all right, we've got to have some semblance of technical coordination. We've got to have a little bit of absolute strength. Maybe we have some accessories in there. We can finish out with some mobility work, or we can even find some movements that can train mobility and special strength at the exact same time. And that's where all of this stuff pieces together so that we can ultimately improve the distances that we are throwing with the discus. And if you struggle to piece this together, you don't fully comprehend how to put together a full unified strength training program for the discus, you can click on the link down below. We're gonna provide you with 2 free training days so that you can learn exactly how a full program would be laid out. You can click on the link down below. It's going to take you over to our website. You're going to input your email and then you'll wait a couple seconds and we'll send you that email that has those free workouts so that you can further understand what you need to know when it comes to strength training for the discus throw. So at Throws University, we get asked questions all the time like, hey Dane, I want to know what are the best strength exercises that I can do to increase my throws in the discus? And I think that these questions, they're perfectly fine, right? And they go a long way, but we've got to understand the actual physical keys behind throwing the discus. It's not as easy as, hey, do this exercise and your discus is going to get better. We've got to think about it from the perspective of what actually happens when we're throwing the discus. When we're throwing the discus, there's going to be a lot of forces generated. There's going to be a lot of very deep mobile positions that we're going to be hitting. There's going to be a rapid rate of coordination. There's going to be a technical aspect behind it. There's going to be a lot of speed at the finish of the throw that we've got to learn how to control while we're trying to finish that discus throw. So there's a lot of different keys that go into throwing the discus far. And ultimately it comes down to who can coordinate the fastest, who can have the best technique so that you can coordinate the fastest, and then who can control the power that you've created by having good technique and by having rapid coordination. And that is precisely where the strength exercises come into play. The strength exercises are going to be there for us to learn how to control that rapid coordination, to learn how to control our speed, and ultimately to help us sit big and have a monster finish so that we have a bigger discus throw. So diving right into it, let's start at that number 4 spot. I like to use the back squat, and I like to use every variation possible behind the back squat. I like my throwers, my discus throwers, to squat ass to grass. We've had Sam Mattis, a world championship finalist, who's back squatted 285 kilos. I've also had Sam and all my other discus throwers, including 2016 Olympian Alex Rose, do partial squats. Do other variations of squats, do safety bar squats, anything along these lines. We've even had Nick Arrhenius, who's recently thrown 66.46, hitting a PR at the age of 38, also a 2008 Olympian, work with simple exercises like Spanish squats or goblet squats. And so what I like to utilize is the back squat predominantly. And all this goes back to what are those key elements? The back squat's going to help us develop that rapid coordination in other movements like the Olympic lifts. It's also going to help us develop really nice trunk stability in the middle of the circle. And on top of that, it's going to help us have that strength so that we can control our technique to have a monster finish at the front of the circle. Coming in at that number 3 spot, we've got the bench press, and I'm sure a lot of people are grumbling right now. Really? The bench press? Like, you really think the bench press is that good for throwing the discus? You're not lying on your back. And one of the things with people saying stuff like that, it doesn't make sense. Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk, who I happen to train under for a year living in Canada, has done the research. He's shown that the bench press has a very significant transfer to discus throwers even over 60 meters. So they've seen that if your bench press goes up, your discus throw is likely going to go up. So it's important that we have a nice and strong bench press. And so I think that a lot of this factors into, 1, we're gonna have a really strong shoulder girdle, and 2, we're gonna have really, really strong pecs. And if we can think about, even with that closer grip bench press, now all of a sudden our humerus is going to be back behind our shoulder quite a bit more. That's going to mimic the position the discus is in when we're hitting the front of the circle. Now our chest can handle that tension and we can continue to coordinate and accelerate through that finish, and that's going to lead to that big throw that we're all wanting regarding the discus throw. And we use the bench press predominantly with all of our discus throwers. Sam Mattis has benched over 500 pounds. Alex Rose has benched over 500 pounds. So a lot of our top end discus throwers have done really, really well training with a big bench press. Coming in at that number 2 spot, we got pull-ups. So a lot of people forget, one of the big important aspects behind throwing the discus is making sure that our shoulder girdle is mobile, making sure that our thoracic spine is mobile so that we have nice thoracic extension and we have strong thoracic rotation as well so that we can catch that discus nice and deep. But on top of that, so that we can carry the discus well out of the back into the middle of the circle. And that's one of the things behind pull-ups, is we've got to think about a couple different factors here. 1, training pull-ups is going to lengthen our lats, especially if we're training dead hang pull-ups. 2, it's going to help with structural stability, with structural integrity. If we are training the bench press, we've got to make sure that we're also training those antagonistic muscles, the lats, the rhomboids even to a point. And so that's going to help us a lot with having a nice stable back, and that's going to help us transfer over really, really well. But ultimately, it still comes back to that mobility that we want to hit. So if you're hitting those pull-ups, a lot of throwers make excuses about doing pull-ups, that we're heavier. We don't want to do pull-ups, but it's really, really important, and the carryover is very, very high. If we can hit pull-ups, we can lengthen our lats, we can be a little bit more structurally sound, and that's gonna help us to control the speed at the front of the circle. Before we get into that number one exercise, if you guys want more information around strength training or you want a strength-based program provided by Throws University, head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can click on the link down below and you can pick up a strength-based training program that's gonna help you quite a bit to increase your discus throw. So that number one strength lift is the single leg squat. And a lot of people might be blown away by, wait, single leg squats, really? Yes. A lot of the throw is going to be done on one leg, and we've got to have trunk stability when we're on a unilateral position, when we're on that single leg position. So when we're coming out of the back of the circle, we've got to be able to have nice dynamic trunk control as our right leg sweeps around the left. We've got to be stable. And on top of that, training a single leg, training unilaterally is going to help us sort of iron out any weaknesses that we might have on our left side if we're a right-handed discus thrower. That is where we're going to see a huge carryover, is that the stronger our non-dominant side gets, the better it can decelerate at the front of the circle. So think about that left leg hitting a nice, slightly bent left knee. Think about Robert Harding. His left side has to be strong enough to handle all the forces that the right side and the left side have created throughout the throw. So a lot of that energy is transferring into his transfer leg. If we remember, that left leg, that is not the block leg, that is known as the transfer leg. So all of that energy is transferring into the transfer leg. So it's got to be really, really strong in a unilateral position. And if you look at the finish of the throw in the discus, the left leg's forward, the right leg's back, it's almost exactly looking like a split squat or a split jerk. So you're in a very unilateral position. Now we put that back leg up on a roller, and we're able to develop a lot of strength and a lot of trunk stability as well when we're in that unilateral position. So I love training single leg squats because it also carries over to the way that your right leg grounds in the middle of the circle. If you're in the middle of the circle, think about that half turn position. Now you can handle that speed in the middle and you can continue to accelerate, and then you can get to that left leg, the transfer leg at the front. You can help decelerate from the left side as the right side accelerates to that big monster finish. So recently we just returned from the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, where Sam Mattis placed 8th at the Olympics in the discus special strength training. And so initially we've got to go into what's the history of special strength work. What is special strength? And I think that I was fortunate enough to have trained under Anatoly Bondarchuk, sort of the godfather of special strength training. And one of those big factors that he utilized was we would always do a throw session, and then we would do a lifting session, and we would follow that lifting session up with some movement that would mimic the actual throw. So from a strength component, it might mimic the actual rotation, it might mimic the speed, or getting close to mimicking the speed. And so my thought process when I interpret this now, after over a decade of coaching, is that special strength is essentially that bridge between throwing in the circle, the weight room strength that you're gonna be developing, and then that's that bridge. It's that piece in the middle. It's sort of like the keystone in the middle, right? No pun intended, as we're sitting here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania. So anyway, what we can think about is that if we can bridge those big gains that we're getting in the weight room, you know, using someone like Sam. Sam has front squatted 230 kilos, right? He's bench pressed 515 in pounds. He's jerked 500 pounds. He's push pressed 200 kilos. He's extremely strong from an absolute strength perspective. So what movements have we utilized for him to increase that special strength so it can transfer really well into the circle? So how can we take that absolute strength and create this twitchier movement that then goes directly into throwing that 2K really far so he can get 8th at the Olympics? And that takes us into those 4 key exercises. So that 4th exercise, and we have actually never done this specifically with Sam, but we've done this with other athletes here, is bowling pin standing throws, or even just bowling pin variations. So anything that has a handle. You could think about like a D ball that you're throwing, not the drug. You can think about a swinging medicine ball with a long rope that you could throw, a bowling pin that you can throw into a wall or into a net or into a tarp or into a field, and you might have 10 bowling pins and you just rip right through this, hitting it from a big standing throw position or half turn position or South African. but you get through that position and maybe you use that bowling pin and you take 40 to 50 reps in a short period of time. So it's not as focused on the actual specific technique, it's more focused on almost mimicking a strength training workout. And so you can use that bowling pin to try and lengthen that finish, to try and strengthen your trunk, to try and strengthen the shoulder. Now, one of the big key factors when we're doing special strength work is that we don't want to blast our shoulder. We don't want to lead to pec strain. We don't want to lead to lower back pain. So we've got to be aware of that as we bring that into our training. We don't want to go skyrocketing our volume of training right away. Just slowly input this. And I would recommend starting with a simpler movement right off the bat with that standing throw, and then getting into half turns or getting into, a step and stand or shuffle, anything along those lines. But utilize that, 2 to 3 times a week and see how it feels and see what it does after 4 to 6 weeks to your actual discus throw. That third key exercise is a kettlebell throw, and this is actually movements that we have used with Sam, movements that we've used with other discus throwers, is we've taken a 15-pound kettlebell, a 25-pound kettlebell, and we've actually thrown this for distance from our discus circle, which has a net, and actually go over the shot sector. And so you could use that weight, and this is a movement that I actually stole directly from Filip Milanov back in 2017, his big year on the international stage, where he was consistently throwing, it looked like a 10-kilo kettlebell, and he would throw that from a South African, from a full position, get to the front and do a non-reverse. And so what we were doing with Sam a couple years ago is we would play around with doing some standing throws, and then after a certain point we would do a little bit of a step in half turn, all with that non-reverse. And the whole goal was to spend 4 to 6 weeks really developing that strong finish, really developing that holding position with his left side so that he can rotate everything forward and actually smash that finish. Now, the one downfall behind the kettlebell throws is it is really heavy. So you're gonna catch it really deep, but you've gotta be aware that, again, if you start to feel your pec or your shoulder a little bit, back off, take some time away from it, and make sure that you let your body adapt and recover. So utilize kettlebell throws. I would say with something a little bit heavier along these lines, once or twice a week, focus on that long grounded finish and increasing that rotational strength at the front. Now, that second key exercise that we'll utilize for special strength training for discus throws is a side medicine ball throw. So this is gonna be really simple, and this is something that we do all the time. You can throw the side medicine ball for distance. You can throw the side medicine ball for a reaction period when you catch off the wall and you react really quickly. You can change the weight. You can use a 4-kilo medicine ball. You can use a 7-kilo medicine ball, and they're all gonna have a unique place in your training. So it's really important to learn how to feel that big stretch, that lengthening across the trunk, and how we're gonna finish rapidly, transferring into that transfer leg so that we can understand how energy moves forward on the finish. And it's a great movement to really feel that good strength, that good power, that good rotational elasticity that you need at the front of the circle with the discus. And I recommend 2 to 3 times a week utilizing these side medicine balls. Now, before I go even further into that number 1 exercises, don't use all of these in 1 week. Play around with it program to program and try to figure that out. And if you do need help with that, you can pick up our Throws U pre-built program that's down below in our description. You can click on the link, head over to Throws University, and we're gonna have some of these in your training program, so it's gonna be a little bit easier for you to adapt this into your overall periodization. That number 1 exercise that we like to utilize for special strength movements for discus is a banded stand throw. So we love to do banded stands all the time. Okay, so we'll do banded stands, we'll do half turn stands. And one of the things is we use our Power Elastic bands that you can click on the link down below, pick up a Power Elastic today, that has a handle, so it's really easy to mimic, it's really easy to feel that big stretch, and that's one of the key factors behind using a band, is that it gives you a little bit more tension on the finish, so that's gonna help your mind-muscle connection, that's gonna help transfer over to a better technical finish. Now, one of those key factors, when we're doing a banded stand, I love to do banded stands with that full big rotation on the finish. And then when you get to that finish, let's say you do 7 to 10 banded standing finishes, when you get to the finish, you can do pumps here to really try and feel the grounded finish, to try and feel that left side of your abs doing a whole bunch of work that's connected into that pec. And I think that that is what's going to help lead to that faster finish and a greater technical finish as well. So that's a big factor here, is that all of these movements transfer, they're the bridge between the weight room and the throwing circle. So if we can get stronger and more explosive in the finish, and we have better technique, that's going to transfer to big monster throws. And that's got to be that key factor here, is that that's the whole goal. We build up the big engine in the weight room, we work some absolute strength, and then we increase that technical coordination by utilizing special strength almost on a regular basis. And that's going to lead to those monster throws so that you can be the next one that places top 8 at the Olympics. If you need help with your programming, with your training, head over to throwsuniversity.com. Until next time, guys, peace. So we get asked all the time at Throws University, hey, what do I need to bench press to throw this far? What do I need to back squat to throw this far? And we need to take that step back, right? We need to take a step back and first just analyze. If we're talking about the discus specifically, we need to know what is actually needed to throw the discus far. We know we have to be very mobile in our upper back. We want to catch that discus nice and deep so that when we get that non-dominant leg grounded at the front of the circle, we have a long, big pull. We feel nice tension across our abs. We have that mobility in our upper back to lead to a stronger finish. We know that we have to be strong. We have to have absolute strength so that we can handle a ton of force when we're at the front of the circle. We also know that we're in unilateral positions when we're grounding in the middle of the circle. So we need to have some serious unilateral strength. We also know that we need to have a rapid rate of coordination. So that's going to entail some other different factors. So all of these factors play into the development of becoming an elite level discus thrower. But as we work up the ranks, maybe you're in 9th grade, you're in 10th grade, you're a younger high school discus thrower, and you want to know what it takes just to qualify for states or to make that state final. Now we know what those elements are, but what does that mean for actual weight room data? How can we get to that next level? Now we're going to dive deep into those numbers so that you have a nice blueprint of where you need to go to become a 150-foot discus thrower. So starting off, we're talking about the snatch, okay? So we know that our upper back is going to have to be more mobile if we're doing snatch work. If our upper back is more mobile, we're gonna catch that discus nice and deep. If our hips are mobile, we're also going to have a better stretch from our left hip to our right hand. We're gonna have more mobile hips. That leads to greater trunk tension. That trunk tension leads to a better reaction. We're gonna have a stretch shortening cycle all the way across our abs. And that's where the snatch comes into play. So when we're talking about throwing the discus really, really far, we've got to know that you've got to incorporate the Olympic lifts in your training. You've got to utilize the snatch. That doesn't mean that you need to start off and just start hammering as heavy weights as possible. It means there's a technical aspect. And when you can switch your mind from being that meathead high school kid to being a little bit more technically minded, and you can build and improve your technique. Now, when you build and improve your technique in the snatch, that's going to lead to discus technical improvements as well. But so what is that number? If you want to throw 150 feet in the discus in high school, you should be able to snatch 175 pounds. So if you can snatch 175 pounds or about 80 kilos, you have the strength and the ability to coordinate rapidly enough that you can ultimately hit that 150-foot discus throw, and that's going to get you to place in the top 8 at your discus state championships. That next key lift is going to be the clean, and we know when you're grounding in the middle, when that right side hits, you've got a lot of force that you also have to absorb in your strong leg. You've got to absorb that force in your trunk. You've got to be able to control that force absorption and reuse that energy effectively on the finish. And that's where the clean comes into play. When you're catching that clean, you learn how to absorb force very effectively, but you also learn how to develop it off the floor. Maybe you're even catching that clean in the hole and you're coming out of the hole really, really rapidly. That's going to help improve your hip mobility, your lower back mobility. That's going to lead to better throws ultimately long term. And so if you want to throw 150 feet in the discus in high school, you've got to clean at least 235 pounds. So 235 pounds or about 107 kilos. Those are the numbers that you need to put out and to strive towards if you want to make that state championship final. Now let's get into some upper body work. We've got the bench press. A lot of coaches will say, oh, bench press is so overrated. But I've got a little story for you. When I trained under the world-class Olympic champion, Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk, he followed a ton of 60-meter discus throwers. And these discus throwers, as they increased their bench press over 180 kilos, the more they got to 180 and then over 180 kilos, the likelihood of them throwing 60 meters or about 196 feet, the likelihood increased. There was actually a better transfer from the bench press to the discus based off of his research than there was from the bench press to the shot put. Okay, so the bench press correlates really, really well to the discus. We've got to think about, even if you have a little bit more of a closer grip, now all of a sudden our humerus is getting nice and deep, and when our humerus is nice and deep, we're gonna have a really big stretch on our pec. Now if we can think about that inside the circle, now we take that humerus and we just extend our arm. That's where the discus needs to be when we're grounding at the front of the circle. So we need to have the ability to handle that big stretch across our pecs. Now with the bench press, if you want to throw 150 feet, you've got to bench press 275 pounds. That's a pretty reasonable bench press. It's nothing crazy, but it's very, very reasonable. It's also still a pretty solid bench. It's about 125 kilos. If your bench isn't there yet, I recommend 5 sets of 10 to 15 push-ups every single night until you're hitting that 275 pound level. And when you hit that 275 pounds, now all of a sudden, your likelihood of throwing 150 feet is going to be that much higher. Now that takes us into our back squat. So we know that if you're going to be squatting with a high bar back squat, okay, that's the other key factors here. We have to establish, sadly, what a back squat is. We want a high bar position. We want our trunk to be more upright. We want to have full range of motion. We want our glutes and our hamstrings draped over our gastroc, okay? We want that hip mobility. We want that lower back mobility. We want that posture. Okay, think about the posture of the back squat. Now think about grounding in the middle with that right leg in the middle and being a little bit more upright. Now we can have that left side rotate around the right side. That's where the back squat comes into play. Okay, so on top of that, the back squat also helps us hold that finish position at the front. It helps us rotate into our transfer leg. So when we're hitting better positions at the front and we have more absolute strength, we can hold higher levels of energy. Another key factor with the back squat, the snatch, the clean, they will dramatically improve because of our strength in the back squat. So if we improve the back squat, we will see an improvement in the snatch and the clean. And when we see an improvement in the snatch and the clean, we're also going to start to see a really big improvement in our throws. So the back squat is almost covering 3 different movements. And that's a really, really important factor. Now, what number do we need to hit? If we're hitting 300 plus pounds, or about 137 kilos, if we're hitting those weights in the back squat, we should be capable of throwing 150 feet. That's going to get us to that state final. That's potentially going to get us our first state medal, and we're going to feel a lot better about that work that we put in the off season. Now, before we get into that front squat number, a lot of these numbers are hard to follow. And also, what if you want to throw 130 feet? Maybe you want to throw 175 feet or 190 feet. Maybe you want to throw 65 feet in the shot put. Where can you find all of this information? If you click on the link down below, you can head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can pick up our Ultimate Throwers Assessment. And we have all of these benchmark numbers laid out so that you know exactly what you need to do in the off season to work towards, so that you know where you're at in the weight room in relative comparison to where you're at in the circle. You can see where your weaknesses are, you can formulate a nice program, and you can strive to lengthen that PR over and over again. Now that leads us into our final exercise, the front squat. And so a lot of high school kids like to avoid the front squat. They don't like the feeling on their wrists or their elbows, or maybe their lats are really tight, their triceps are really tight. But do this for me. Roll out your lats, roll out your triceps, do some mobility work throughout your wrists. And if you still can't front squat like a bodybuilder. I might make fun of you a little bit, but not a ton, okay? Front squat like a bodybuilder. Make sure you're getting that full range of motion. And the reason why I recommend this is the carryover of that core stability is off the charts. The front squat is one of the best ab exercises that you could ever do. Now, think about this with a clean. If we front squat more, our clean is gonna go up. It's almost the exact same movement, right? If we front squat more, the back squat's gonna go up. So now we start to see how all of these weights and all of these different exercises are interchangeable. They can feed off of each other. They work synergistically. And so if you can front squat 275 pounds, you're gonna be able to smash 150 feet. You smash 150 feet, you're medaling at your state final. Now all of a sudden you're medaling at that state final and you're starting to get interest from coaches. You're getting interest from college level coaches. They wanna see if you can throw 170 feet. They wanna see if you can throw 180 feet. And now all you've gotta do is get back to that board and sit there, lay out those goals, lay out that program, and start working your butt off that off season. So over the last 10 years, one of the coolest things that I've witnessed is to see the dramatic increase in participation of females in the weight room. And it's really, really cool to see a lot of girls getting into lifting weights for sports performance, specifically for throwing. So a lot of women in the high school level and even in middle school level are starting to notice, like, hey, if I get into the weight room, I'm gonna throw a little bit further. I'm gonna feel a little bit stronger. I'm gonna have better confidence when I get into the circle. And that has contributed to the dramatic rise in performances over the last 5 to 10 years in the shot put and in the discus. We've seen a lot of high school girls come out of high school dropping serious bombs that may have been once in a generation throwers even just 20 years ago. Now it's happening on a regular basis that girls are throwing 50 plus feet and 160 plus feet in the discus. And all this success that women are seeing on a much more consistent basis is from the work they're doing in the weight room. And so we know that if you're a shot putter or you're a discus thrower, we know that you have to have absolute strength. You also have to have a really rapid rate of coordination. You have to be able to recruit your motor units, your muscle fibers very, very quickly. If you want to throw far, you've got to be strong, you have to be mobile, and you have to recruit really, really quickly. And on top of that, you have to have a technical mindset. Throwing the discus is technique oriented. So if you can hit technical positions and get out of them very quickly, that's going to lead to those longer throws in the discus. And so let's dive right into it. And what are those top 5 numbers that we need to hit to achieve 120 feet as a high school female throwing the discus? So that first key lift to throwing the discus far, we're gonna talk about the snatch. Okay, so if we are in high school and we're snatching and we're working on that technical development, we want to be technically minded. We want to hit good positions off the floor. We want to get that bar nice and tight into our hips and catch tight overhead. If we catch tight overhead, now we're much more stable in our thoracic spine. And when we're more stable in our thoracic spine, now all of a sudden we can catch that discus a little bit deeper. And that's a key factor behind the women's discus. If we are very mobile in our shoulders, that's gonna help the pull on the finish. And that's a key component behind the female discus throwing. And so if you're a high school girl and you want to throw 120 feet, you want to make that state final, you want to be top 8, you want to be top 6 and get that medal draped around your shoulders, you've got to snatch 90 pounds or about 40 kilos. So 40 kilos is about 88 pounds. That puts us right around 90 pounds. Now this number is relatively easy to do, but you've got to be snatching 2 to 3 days a week. It's pretty simple to execute this. It's pretty simple to achieve this, especially if you're doing everything else that you need to do from a technical perspective, from a mobility perspective, from a plyometric perspective. You snatch 90 pounds, you're gonna smash 120 feet, you're gonna make that state final, and you're gonna feel a lot better about yourself and all the work that you put in this past off season. Now that takes us into our next exercise, the clean. If you can think about the clean as a key component behind what we're doing in the middle of the circle, we're gonna be absorbing a lot of force. So when we're catching that clean, we need to squeeze in our gut, we need to squeeze in our back, we need to stay tight through our hips all the way down into the floor, through our feet. And that's where the clean carries over really, really well to those big monster bombs in the discus. And so when we get high school girls to clean at least 125 pounds, we can start to really see the growth in their big discus throws. We can start to really see that PR get a little bit longer and a little bit longer. And now that 125 pounds or about 57 kilos is gonna really pay off. That 125 pounds gets you that 120 feet. And when you're throwing 120 feet, it's very, very likely you're gonna be top 8 at your state championship. Now that takes us into that upper body lift. We know that the bench press correlates really, really well to the discus. We know all the research that Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk did in the Soviet Union and how well the bench press correlates over to longer throws in the discus. When discus throwers increase their bench press up to 180 kilos or about 400 pounds, we will see an increase in their distance thrown. And the same thing is true of high school female discus throwers. As high school female discus throwers bench press a little bit more, now all of a sudden we're gonna start to see that correlation in their standing throw. We're gonna see that correlation on their finish. We know that their shoulder is gonna get stronger. We know that when we get that discus nice and deep, there's gonna be a big stretch across their pecs. When they finish and they have a stronger upper body, have stronger pecs, now that finish, that speed from the discus is gonna carry over because they've done a really good job developing their bench press. So if you wanna throw 120 feet, you've gotta bench press 135 pounds. So that's about 60, 61 kilos, okay? So one of the cool aspects here is that I love at our gym, when you come in, you can see just high school girls all over the place benching with a 45 on each side, hitting that big plate for reps. And that level of confidence that these girls have from having that strong bench press is awesome. And not only does that carry over to the discus, it's gonna carry over to other sports as well. You put that big 45 on, you hit that for a single, now you're making that state final and you're medaling, you're coming home with that medal draped around your shoulders and you're proud of all that work that you've done. So now that's gonna take us into the back squat. If we can think about that trunk being upright, we want that high bar, we want a full range of motion, we want our hamstrings and our glutes draped over our calves when we're getting to the bottom position. We want our abs staying nice and tight. We wanna squeeze through our belly button, drive that chest up fast out of the bottom position to achieve a full back squat. That's what we're talking about. High bar, full range of motion back squat. This correlates really, really well to the discus. It's gonna help us hold that finish position in a strong fashion. It's gonna help improve our clean. It's gonna help improve our snatch. And that's the biggest thing with the back squat. The transfer of training carries over not only to these other two lifts, it carries over to specific positions at the front of the circle. So we know that this is where we're gonna develop a lot of our absolute strength. So when we can back squat 165 pounds or about 75 kilos, that's going to lead to our ability to throw 125 feet. And it's also going to push these two numbers. When these two numbers increase, this will definitely increase. Now you're walking around, you're feeling stronger, your posterior chain is stronger, you have more confidence when you're getting into the circle and you're smashing those big discus throws. So we know all these benchmark numbers are key to developing as a discus thrower. We know that we have to hit all of these lifts on a consistent basis. But what else can we do? What if we want to throw 140 feet or 150 feet? What if we only want to throw 100 feet? What can we do? If you want more information about benchmark numbers and about distances that correlate with specific benchmark lifts, you can head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can pick up your copy of the Ultimate Throwers Assessment. Our book, The Ultimate Throwers Assessment, lays out all of these benchmark lifts specific to the distance that you want to throw so that you can make consistent gains in the weight room, in the off season, and in the in season, so that you can constantly make progress and you know exactly where your training needs to improve. So finally, that takes us into our front squat. And if we can think about that front squat position, it's almost identical to the clean catch. We want that bar draped across our shoulders. We want our elbows almost at a perfect 90 degrees. We want to have full range of motion. We want our knees tracking forward, our butt tracking back. We want our torso nice and upright. If you want to hit the abs, one of the best ab exercises ever is to front squat, because you've got to stay tight in your gut. You've got to stay tight in your upper back. Now, when you're tight in your abs, you're tight in your upper back, and you're holding a large load like that weight in the front squat, now you can get nice and deep and nice and fast out of bottom position, and that's going to help you improve different positions in the middle of the circle, the finish. It's going to help you exit the back of the circle more effectively, and it's also going to dramatically increase your clean. The front squat can also improve your back squat, so it has a really, really good transfer of training. Now, you need to front squat 145 pounds. So if you can front squat 145 pounds and you can back squat 165 pounds, you're gonna throw that big 120 footer that's gonna get you over that barrier. It's gonna get college coaches to start to be more aware of who you are. Who is that girl throwing 120 plus feet? Is she gonna throw 130? Is she gonna throw 140? What happens? What if this girl keeps getting stronger in the off season? What if she throws 150 feet? And those are the thoughts that might come through your mind as you continue to develop these numbers, as you continue to gain more success in the circle and improve that confidence long term. So if you want help with developing these benchmark numbers, click on the link down below. You can pick up a strength-based training program from throwsuniversity.com, or you can pick up your Ultimate Throwers Assessment. It's going to help you on your journey to getting atop that podium. We're going to give you 4 of the craziest skilled strength exercises to help improve your discus throw, and we're going to start right now. All right, so let's go 60 seconds real quick. What do we want to work on? What's the technique breakdown? Inside the discus, okay, we've got what, 2.5 meters to work with. So we have to execute technique that's going to set us up to increase our rate of force production very, very rapidly. Okay, so we want to have a high impulse expression. That means we need to accelerate the 2K discus, the 1.75, the 1.6K, the 1.5 potentially, the 1K, whatever level you're at, we have to be focusing on accelerating that implement as quickly as possible. So if we can break down getting out of the back of the circle, like Christian Che, like Sam Mattis, like Alex Rose, like Val Ullman, and then get to the front, what we want to look at is transferring that angular momentum into a really strong finish. And that's going to take us right into this first crazy exercise where we got our HAF band, our power elastic band here, okay? And if you're a little bit younger, you're not as experienced, just use the strength band right here, okay? I actually like to use both of these together. You can start, if you've never done this movement, you can start with just hitting this position here. Okay, this is something that we can use with fighters, with offensive linemen. You can use this with wrestlers, and we want to focus on, if we're a right-handed thrower, that right hip extension, getting into that flat left foot, okay, and feeling our abs, okay, all the way around as we rotate, and even that left arm, okay, squeezing that left arm nice and tight. Now, what I want to add in here is going to be with the strength band, okay, so we have the HAF band around my abs, okay. I want to add in the strength band for a little bit of a pulse. The pulse will potentiate your nervous system, and then I even like to add in an isometric action at the end. So I could use the strength band for both of these if I'm not as advanced, if I'm a younger thrower. But this will help you feel that position at the front of the circle. Okay, so I actually recommend, instead of doing like crazy toe bug squashing drills with your right foot, do something like this a little bit more. It's gonna help you feel that finish a little better. So I wanna go here, okay? Feel this little pulse. Boom, 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 okay? Let's say you do 7 to 15 pulses and your abs are gonna light up and your pecs. And then all of a sudden, isometric action, holding right here, and try to visualize and feel that position that you wanna hit at the front of the circle. That's what skilled strength is all about. We wanna focus on increasing the movement, okay, increasing that angular momentum through the finish, but bridging the work that we're doing in the weight room to the work that we're gonna be doing out in the circle. That's what skilled strength is all about. So now we're gonna give you 3 more movements that you can use to improve your discus. Okay, so this second skilled strength movement is gonna get a little wild, okay? It's gonna be a little bit more dynamic. There's gonna be a greater stretch shortening cycle. Okay, I wanna go into a little bit of the weeds here. If you watch baseball, okay, I'm on this baseball kick right now. Watch Vlad Guerrero and his counter movement, okay? His counter movement as the ball's coming out of the pitcher's hand, he drops his hips and he sits into that. Gets a really nice stretch shortening cycle across his entire trunk, which leads into his hands, and that leads to him being one of the best hitters of all time, right? So that's something similar that we wanna look at in the discus. If we take a step, okay, and that's what this movement's gonna be, we wanna catch a ball here, so we need a partner. We wanna catch that ball here. Feel that stretch shortening cycle that we would get when we're catching the discus at the front, and then just absolutely slam that med ball into a wall. Ideally, it would be a concrete wall, right, for us. So I'm gonna go here, boom. Ah! Boom. 2 more. Boom. Now I could turn a little bit more there. Boom. Okay, so that's pretty aggressive. I would try to do this like 3 to 4 days out from a big comp. You could just go like 3 sets of 5 or even 5 sets of 3, but feel that stretch and then all of that momentum go forward into the implement. This is going to be a little bit more of like an accessory mix with that skilled strength, but it's really, really applicable, especially when you're starting to peak. And if you have a discus thrower that struggles with adductor pain, okay, a little bit in their groin as they come out of the back of the circle, this will help tremendously. It's also gonna help younger discus throwers feel the stretch from their hips, okay, from their adductors and from their glutes all the way across their chest and through their dynamic trunk position into their hands. So I'm gonna demonstrate here. Ideally, we would have a Roman chair back extension here. And I wanna set up like this, where I want my right foot forward, so that's gonna help with my groin. So what I wanna do is I wanna have my inside leg, okay, my inside leg is gonna be my right leg here, and we're gonna switch sides, right? So that's my lead leg. Now, what I wanna focus on is actually a little bit of deceleration. So I'm gonna go here, drop, come back up, drop, come back up, drop, come back up. Oof. 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 And what ends up, dude, what ends up happening is, that didn't hurt. I was just thinking like, wow, that's absolutely phenomenal. I love using this. We've even used this with banded variations with rowers, actual rowers like canoers, where we put the bands behind them. But what you do is you feel this all in that non-dominant side, and then from that lower back, that QL area, all the way across your abs here, and then you rotate quickly. You'll even feel that a little bit in your groin. It helps you be more dynamic. It's gonna help you increase that sort of trunk rotation, and that's gonna lead to a much stronger finish and a much better feeling in the circle. That's why we're improving that skill with some strength. Okay, this next one is gonna be wild as well. This is gonna really help with that deceleration at the front. Remember back to the beginning when we talked about that 60-second technical breakdown. We want to increase the rate of force production. We want to accelerate the implement as quickly as possible. Part of that is we think about a trebuchet, okay? That left side is going to lock in on the finish and going to help that lever arm swing around. So we want to be able to decelerate really quickly while accelerating around it. That's where this exercise comes into play. This is going to be a plate half turn. Now, remember, it's skilled strength, so we want to have a little bit of a load. We want to have some form of adaptation to increase that strength, but we also want to have it mimic what we're going to be doing in the circle, so we can have a little bit of that skill work improve. So that's where this comes into play. We're bridging the gap between the weight room and the circle. So we're going to be here, and as we want to do a little counter movement here, okay? Left leg comes forward. I'm going to catch the implement behind me, come through and hold overhead. And ideally, I want to get to the position where that front foot is grounded and I can stick that. I want to have good isometric action. This is a great movement, and you can go a lot lighter if you're using a hydro weight or like a 5-pound plate with young kids, just teaching them to get a lot of reps in the circle. So you could even take this out to the circle and say, hey, let's do 100 of these so you guys get used to that feeling of generating angular momentum, okay? So we're gonna be here, boom, hold, 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 okay? Boom, hold, okay? We wanna feel that position right at the front. We wanna try to get that left knee to land more open, just like Che, Val Allman, Alekna, and then we wanna be able to control that finish position so we can continue that path of acceleration. So if you guys need help with your overall training, head over to throwsuniversity.com where you can pick up one of our programs, a technical analysis, or one of our sweet books. Make sure you use these exercises today so that you can drop some bombs. Peace.